of story and creative development, and I've been helping to drive a lot of the narrative of the Overwatch universe.
I'm Jeff Chamberlain. I'm in charge of the art side of the animation department, and I directed the first announcement piece for Overwatch.
I'm Ben Dye. I'm the director for Recall and Dragons.
I'm Jeremiah Johnson. I directed Alive and Episode 4.
Ooh. All right, guys. So in a nutshell, I know this is tough, but in a nutshell, what is the world of Overwatch, and why do we need these heroes?
Well, so wow. In a nutshell, I guess what I'd say about Overwatch is it takes place in the future. It's about our world, Earth, and I think the thing that really makes Overwatch is this sort of optimistic view of the future we have. You know, when we decided that we were going to approach this game, we thought that there had been a lot of different versions of the future. A lot of them sort of things didn't turn out well, and we kind of wanted to play with one where things turned out great, and where, you know, it's really inspirational and like a future that someday, like, maybe we'd like to live in.
Yeah.
And I think the way that we really express that is through our 21 hero characters, which come from all around the world, and they have all these really cool, you know, characteristics and personalities, and I think they really help to bring this world to life.
Absolutely.
I think early on, one of the things that like crystallized the entire IP for us is I think we were in a meeting with Jeff Kaplan or something. He walked in and he said, "There's this world that's worth fighting for. It's an optimistic future. It's also, we're looking at doing this other project over here." And we all kind of stopped him and went, "A world worth fighting for. That's where we're going to be. That's what is inspiring." And I think the project just kind of took off from that point.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the backstory in Overwatch and how it's being communicated, because you're talking about this future world that we all want to fight for. How are you guys going about telling the story and lore of Overwatch, both in-game and out of game? Because I know you're making comics, you're doing shorts, and these are things that everyone can enjoy if they're not playing the game.
Totally. I think what has been super exciting about developing Overwatch is usually when this type of media evolves, it comes from a game and it's game first, and then you build the content around it. We had the advantage of building the world holistically. So we were building the shorts and the comics all at the same time as the game team was developing the game. And so there's this great fluidity back and forth between the game team's ideas and the ideas that would come out from the character shorts and the character comics. I think a lot of the ideas that we were building for the maps ended up going into the game, and vice versa. And it's it's been really rare, I think, but pretty amazing.
It's been pretty awesome. It's pretty collaborative. I remember when we first started out, we talked about what we should do for the announcement piece that we released at BlizzCon, I don't know, like 2 years ago now. And we were in a room with Kaplan, and he said, "I think you guys should just do what you think is right. Here's what the world is, but otherwise, you guys tell me what you think is good." And then we just started jamming there and came up with something that we felt really reflected the universe.
Well, now you're talking about the 2014 BlizzCon cinematic release. This was the big announcement that you guys had for Overwatch. How important was it for you guys to be telling the story the way that you guys did? Because when it was first seen, people weren't quite sure what they were watching. Everyone loved it. Everyone was in shock and awe, saying, "What is this?" But there were two kids in this. One kind of represented this kid inside of all of us who's super excited about it. And there was a little older kid who was a bit jaded, and the back and forth between the two. Who are these kids, and why are they going to this museum? And will we see these kids again?
That's a good question. You know, it's funny, like James said earlier, we'll put stuff into our cinematics that end up going to the game and vice versa, obviously. So as far as whether we'll see the kids again, I think it's still to be determined. I don't think we've had any official discussions of whether that would happen or not.
They're going to become supervillains, is
Well,
what
she says, the world needs more heroes.
Right.
Says
And we cut the
boy.
line where the kid said, "And more villains."
There's been a lot of talk about bringing the kids back, but nothing official. It's just usually kind of in a joking manner, but I wouldn't be surprised if someday there's something with them.
Well, let's talk about how you guys set up that release trailer. How did you guys go about saying, well, this is how we want to tell the story of Overwatch. This is how we want to present it to the world.
You know, it's interesting. When we first met in that same meeting that I was talking about, the lead artist, Arnold Sang, was there. And he said that he really wanted it to be centered around kids, which was a departure for Blizzard for sure. You know, usually what we make is very, mighty, epic, warriors and stuff like that. And so my first thought was like, man, I don't know if we know how to do that. But then we started talking about it more, and we realized that there are a lot of things that we really love in the world that are focused around kids, like the story of E.T. or the story of Goonies and stuff like that. And once we started realizing like we could tap into that, that really felt right for the world because, as we've been talking about it being in this bright, optimistic, world, and that's, embodied in these kids. And so it just made sense, and it really clicked pretty quickly.
Seems like kids are really taking to it too, because it was BlizzCon last year. There was a small boy, maybe about 10 years old, who came up in the lore panel, if you remember. He came up to the lore panel and he asked Chris Metzen, he said, why was Winston so mad when Reaper stepped on his glasses?
Right.
And I found it fascinating because as somebody who interviews you guys all the time, it took a child to recognize that small moment that ended up really telling that story. And I know Metzen got fairly verklempt in that moment because he knew what was happening and you guys knew what was going on for Recall. But it took a child to see that.
Yeah.
Kids are really paying attention.
Yeah,
Right.
That's probably the best question at BlizzCon.
Hands down, right?
Yeah.
I think with Jeff's piece, the announcement trailer, I think we saw that there was a theme coming out of that was heroes will rise by seeing heroism. And I think that kind of tapped into that idea of like it's a world worth fighting for. And these heroes we're creating can inspire others to be heroic. And that became kind of a development pillar for the world in general. And I think we looked, it was the first time we realized like there's a theme here that's resonating across everything we're doing. Let's tap into that.
Well, how do you guys go about this writing process for your entire team? Because, we're looking at the video game itself, we're looking at these animated shorts. How do you guys, walk us through how you guys create these short films?
Sure. So there's a team of monkeys that are sitting
Winston?
a team of Winstons, all
With their toes?
living on the moon with typewriters, but like really old, like 1930s typewriters. Everything we do at Blizzard is highly collaborative. There's never a time when just one writer goes off and writes something, comes back and says, this is the story. Because it just wouldn't work that way. There's too many people that are invested in this world, too many people that are invested in the characters, and we're all pretty big believers that one mind alone isn't going to solve the problem. It's going to take all of us. We're going to do it together. And so the writing process is very much, we look at it kind of like a TV writer's room. We have a bunch of writers around, directors in there. We have the game team is there, so Mike will be there, Jeff Kaplan will be there, Metzen will be there. And usually it comes from a character first place where we look at the characters we have and we think, what is it that makes Winston Winston? What drives him? What is his ideology? Why and how can we illustrate that dramatically? Or how, who is Widowmaker? Who is this character? So it doesn't necessarily come from a plotty place. We start asking ourselves those questions, and as we're like asking those questions, we're forced to answer them. And it evolves from there, and then there's scripts that we all beat up together. A writer will go off and write a script. It'll come back, we'll do table reads, we'll all beat it up. And then there's a whole process from there. Once we get a script that everybody loves, the game team approves, everybody's happy, it goes to the director to take it to storyboard.
Right, and for
it
Ben
evolves
and
again.
Jeremiah, for you guys, when you guys get the story, are you guys involved from the beginning as well? Are you in the writers' rooms?
We start out getting the script from James. We read it, and then we sort of talk through with James, Jeff, and Metzen. And usually it's a process of like kind of trying something out, not working, let's go back to storyboards and then sort of trial and error. And in recall cases, we just need to inject a lot of personality to Winston. You mentioned about the glasses earlier. I think it was your idea. Someone's great idea in this piece during the production. We gotta link it up to Jeff's piece. And then there's the logistic of like, hey, what happened when you give a baby gorilla glasses? What's it gonna do? Right. We went through this whole discussion about like, is baby Winston nearsighted? Is that why he's looking at the in the outside?
I was like, wow, he has the exact same prescription. That's amazing.
And that was a discussion.
Was that a discussion?
There were many email threads about that.
There are ideas like, what if it's like this crazy,
future
sci-fi
glasses.
glasses that change prescription as it goes? But I think we're just. It was one of those ideas that we got kicked around.
We realized that they were totemic of his worldview of Dr. Winston, the guy who inspired him and told him never see the world as it appears to be, dare to change it. And so the glasses suddenly mean something so much bigger than just glasses or the prescription of the glasses. They're a representation of everything he believes in, everything that he learned from a father that is most likely not alive anymore.
Yeah. And then you see Reaper just totally step on his glasses and break them. What a jerk. But the Reaper as well, the way that you guys made him move and look, I thought it's fantastic because it really shows a lot of the gameplay elements as well, which is sort of the next topic I wanted to talk to you guys about is how do you guys go about making sure that these animated shorts are reflecting the abilities of the in-game characters. So how do you guys go about deciding how you're going to tell the character's ultimate abilities?
To me, like, it's all about timing, finding that right timing for in the story beats to get the most maximum sort of emotional response from the audience. So that's where we picked that moment when he ran out of the arrow. That's his last ditch effort to fight. And for, I want to say this, but on Tracer, her recall ability, man, that was one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen. You don't see that in the game. It's, you hit the button, you sort of rewind time, but I don't know,
It was so
visually,
perfectly shown
yeah.
why that ability exists. It really tells the backstory to her, and you can see how that would work in the real world and not in the video game. But how is it for you to see that, being that you work on the game itself, to see these relived into an animated film?
It's really awesome. I think, early on when we were working on this, we would tell you guys, like, hey, here are all the, here are their abilities, here are kind of things they do. And then I remember we'd start seeing the boards and like, oh, this ability's in there. And then seeing that process come out and actually seeing like almost every one of the characters' abilities work like perfectly into the story. It's like amazing. And actually that example of the recall is really cool because, in the game, recall it has a very like mechanical function and, you get the idea. But I remember we had a bunch of meetings about it where we got into like, how does it work? Like what actually happens to the world? Because it's a chance that you can really see how this sort of game mechanic would play out in the world, and I think it just makes the characters so much more interesting.
Yeah, it makes her alive. It's incredible. And so, Jeremiah, you're the one who directed that. So how was it for you?
Well, I mean, it was, I think when we set out to make Tracer versus Widowmaker, right? It's like you have Tracer with this incredible superhuman ability to, blink from one point to the other, to be able to rewind her own time. And then you've got just this super assassin. And it just really became a chess match. Kind of going back to what James was saying about like figuring out like who these characters are, what would they do, what's Widowmaker's advantage in this piece. And she's more situationally aware, and she's just an incredible strategist. We intentionally tried to make sure that there was no wasted movement from her, that she was just incredibly efficient from one kill to the next, to the next, to the next.
One shot, one kill.
Yeah, even in to the point where she orchestrated Tracer to be right, where she needed her to be, and then to make a choice. And Tracer, I think 10 times out of 10 would have taken that bullet had she known where she was spatially. But it just goes to show that Widowmaker's mastery of tactics, just won the day.
It really lent to showing the location as well, the locations within the game, because these are all maps within the game that you play in, but you guys are using the characters to show their tactical advantage and whatnot, but you're showing the actual points in the game where a sniper would be. So how is it for you to translate the map in the game into a living environment?
Well, we actually use in-game assets, so the game team does a lot of the hard work for us. There's some translation that has to happen, and we'll build on top of that, or because it's different points in time, some things might be a little bit different. For example, the statue to Mandata wasn't in London at the time because Mandata wasn't dead. So I think the collaboration between the game team and our animation department, it's key. That's key.
Yeah, we saw it a lot in Dragon too, in Hanamura. To me, I go in there and I'm like, oh, well, that's where I set up my turret, and I see this point, but then when I actually go in and you see the emotion that's behind that place, you see why this location means so much to Hanzo and Genji. It just, how is it for you guys to see that? Have a whole extra layer.
That's part of the development philosophy for it. I think all those maps have a story at some level. There's a narrative resonance there, and I think when we try to bring that over to the shorts, we try to bring that out so that the next time the player goes back to that map, it has so much more context. Like JJ was saying about the Mandata statue, that map really kind of crystallized from a fictional standpoint after we figured out what the story was for Alive, because suddenly we realized that this great, religious figure died at this spot. But we were riffing off ideas that were already kind of inherent in the map that Arn and Billy and Chris and Mike had built up, and the idea of Omnix kind of being suppressed in London, but having this hope of this figure named Mandata that was inspiring them.
Okay, so now you're talking about this social, political overtone that's been going on within the world of Overwatch. There's a lot going on there that if you guys could fill in a little bit of the context of what's happening within the world.
Yeah, I think actually the relationship between humans and Omnix, the robots in our world, is like a really key story thread that goes throughout the history of Overwatch. Quick history, about 30 years ago, there was this thing called the Omnic Crisis, where in classic fashion, intelligent robots rebel against humanity, and there was a global conflict that engulfed the world, because it's pretty much where we're headed.
Have we learned nothing from movies?
But the idea is that, that crisis ended, Overwatch came in and sort of brought peace back to the world, and the world's been going in a better direction, but there's this giant population of intelligent robots, and the world is sort of coming to grips with how to deal with them. Different parts of the world deal with them in different ways. For example, in our map Nimbani, that's a place where humans and Omnix live together as equals, and because of that, they've been able to create this amazing, technological, first-class, most technologically advanced city in the world. But in other places, and really exemplified in King's Row in London, is that the Omnics are sort of treated as second-class citizens. They help to build the kind of future London that you see kind of around the edges of the map. But they're really not given the same rights as humans, and so there's a lot of conflict there. Obviously, figures like Mandata are trying to bridge the gap there, but I think that conflict is actually something that's really key and central to the Overwatch story.
And relatable. I mean, I think sci-fi at its best really touches on the human experience, and so even if we're talking about robots, we're talking about themes that I think resonate beyond the fictional bindings. It is relatable. We understand that kind of second-class position that the robots have been put in. And I think, as much of it being a world that is optimistic and hopeful, I think you can't have heroes without a certain amount of villains and conflict and oppression that needs to be overcome.
Yeah.
So I think, we're gonna have that. And it's gonna appear a little bit more as more of the narrative is revealed.
Yeah, because you look at it right now, and you guys are definitely riding this fine line of good versus evil. And you ask yourself, who are the good guys in this environment, and who are the bad guys in this environment? And I haven't personally been able to quite figure out who's good and who's bad. How and
Reaper, good guy.
Reaper, best guy ever. But you look at it and you go, well, there's got to be more to Reaper and who he is and
Right.
what's happening. And when we're finding it out slowly, it was just why I like this, because it's this amount of suspense that we're all in. But how are you guys approaching the fine line between good and evil?
Well, I think we are trying not to have characters that are too much on one side or the other, and I think a lot of it is a matter of perspective. Some of these characters are driven by motives that don't fall easily into good and evil. Is Hanzo a bad guy? Is Symmetra evil? That's one of the ones where it was kind of interesting, because a lot of people are like, oh, Symmetra actually seems pretty cool, but we intended her to be some semi-villainous.
Really?
I think the idea is that she believes in order, and she thinks that she believes that what she's doing is ultimately the best for mankind. Right. But I think that in the details, the implementation might not be the best, and I think that's a good example of the characters and how they see themselves in different ways. Different characters see them in other ways. For example, we built in this Lucio Symmetra rivalry where she's sort of all about order, and he's sort of about chaos and uplift.
Let's have a good time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think there are obviously characters who are bad and are the talent agents or whatever, but there are a few characters that are riding the line, and I don't think that it's set in stone. I think as things go, we'd like to keep things fluid and maybe see how people
You're
evolve.
representing how most people in this world are actually viewed. I mean, people aren't all good or all evil for the most part. So you're really showing that.
I mean, you hear us a lot of times in the development space, we say this over and over, is that every villain is the hero of their own story. And we really approach it that way. So, even Reaper has a point of view. And that'll come out later on, and
Can't wait to know his point of
and
view.
sometimes, he's got one. And sometimes, characters like that feel that you have to break eggs to make an omelet.
Right, and Ben, in Dragons, I mean, I thought it was you see Hanzo and Genji, and those are two characters that, very in particular, that I've been watching to see they're brothers. So which one fell on the wrong side, and why is it necessarily good or bad? And in that short, it really told quite a bit about the two brothers.
Yeah, I mean, we all know Genji's part of Overwatch, or the Overwatch 1. Now that Overwatch disbanded, he sort of disappeared. I love the story of like sort of coming back and finding his brother. And according to the lore, Hanzo is sort of like the free agent assassin, sort of lost his way. I love how we ended the cinematics or the short by not telling you, like, is he gonna be joining his brother, or is he gonna be, doing what he's doing, continue to do what he's doing. So I love that we're sowing the seeds of like future episodes or whatever, but at least people, you kind of relate to, like, people's not gonna change by one event, as big as it is. So it's nice to be able to go, oh, there's more to it, than just what we've been creating.
Absolutely. And also in Alive was a really good one as well, because you got to see the side of Widowmaker to show that, even a spider, the way that she sees a spider and the way she sees what being alive means to her, I had a totally different view of Widowmaker after that short.
Yeah, we want to be honest with the IP, but we want to be able to flex a little bit too. Like, it can't just all be hopeful and optimistic. I think Tracer is still hopeful and optimistic. The hope of who Mandata could be is hopeful and optimistic, or the Omnic and the girl couple, like that's super optimistic. But at the end of the day, there are these dark forces that are going to be peeking around. So it really challenged us and made us really rethink think what Overwatch could be in many ways.
What kind of stories do you guys have about making these shorts? I mean, you guys work with a lot of incredible voiceover actors, some of my favorite in the business. What was it like to be bringing these to life? Are there any great moments that you can remember?
Oh yeah, so the grandfather, the voice narrative behind all the scroll works are Terry Tagawa, which is, he's famous for Rising Sun, Mortal Kombat. I was watching him when I was a little kid, so when I saw him, I got starstruck, and I took a picture with him. But what he brought to the piece was just a sense of this old grandfatherly voice. When he get in the booth, he had this big jacket on and a sweater. I remember really clearly because he took the jacket off, but he left it like kind of draped over his shoulder.
Interesting.
And then he got into this really like samurai pose, and then he just bellowed all these lines out like it was meant for him. Wow. And what he brought to the piece was really solidify all the voice acting, all the meaning behind these scroll works that just really brought the piece to life.
Well, the voice acting across the board in Overwatch has been phenomenal, both in-game and out of game. I know it's the same actors throughout, but it has just been so perfectly on point. For you guys, in creating all of this, what inspires you? What stories do you guys have that inspire your universe, or what writing has inspired your universe to create Overwatch?
For me, one of the things I think is really great about Overwatch is that since it takes place in our world, I can draw a lot of inspiration from stuff around us. One of my favorite parts is when we decide we're going to explore a new character or a new location is I go into like a research phase and I try and consume all this different, popular culture or like history, mythology, and then just try and find things that'll work. Sometimes it's crazy what you'll get the inspiration from. I remember one of the earliest conversations I had on the project was with Arnold Singh, our assistant art director, and we were talking about Hanzo and Genji, and I pitched to him. I was like, okay, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I have this idea for the backstory of these characters, and it's sort of based on Jiro Dreams of Sushi, which is it's a food documentary about this awesome sushi chef, but there's a relationship there between two brothers, which I thought was really interesting. I said, like, maybe why not? So you never know.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I would say primarily it's just the world around us is a huge inspiration for the game.
Yeah. I did not know that. Now that I see the connection, I saw the
to go back and read it.
It's a little different. Their swords aren't as big.
I mean, one of the things that's so cool about Overwatch in general is it's an IP that where we can really tell any sci-fi story. I think we do that a lot at Blizzard. WoW is a fantasy world that can tell any fantasy story, whether it's like high fantasy or sword and sorcery. And I think what's exciting about that for us is we are like ravenous consumers of media. We take in so much content because we love it and we're passionate about it, and we're kind of nerds.
No way.
Well, not these guys, but so we take in all that content, and I think what Overwatch is reflective of is how much it's inspired us, and how much we've taken the best of it and kind of made our own jambalaya, and made something completely new out of everything that we've taken in.
I just want Overwatch Jambalaya now.
It's yeah, licensed product.
Well, visually too, how are you guys inspired to do the short films? Or is there anything in particular, any particular filmmaker that you guys really look up to?
Well, for me, I grew up watching anime, Saturday morning cartoon G.I. Joe. So for Hanzo and Genji piece, to me, it's the ultimate fantasy came true, right? Like I want to do a ninja samurai short, and I get to do it. And incorporating everything I've seen so far, that was embedded in my childhood, and be able to just make something that's like the ultimate dream.
I actually remember sending you the script,
And I know I gotta do it.
The reply email was just all caps and bold.
Pick me.
Ninjas! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Exclamation point!
Well, I asked Jeff, I'm like, hey, after recall, I was like, what am I gonna do next? He's like, well, you got these two options. And I go, for sure, ninja. Ninjas. You just gotta put me on ninjas.
Yeah. In the animation department, we're always sending each other little clips from scenes that like are moving in a way, one way or another. I think we're always trying to find something that like captures you in some way emotionally, pretty in a strong way, right? And so when you see that outside in a TV show or in a movie or anything like that, then we make it a point to say like, hey, did you see this one scene from whatever? And we send it out to each other and just kind of learn from that.
Not only, I would add not only external inspiration though, but I mean, we've got, I think, some of the most talented people in the world working at Blizzard. And at least when we tackled Alive, I went back and watched the original intro piece, cinematic that we did, and camera work was like one of the biggest things in terms of how the camera and the choreography are, the ballet of that violence, right? And so
I love that, the ballet of violence.
we were really intentional about like, okay, that's the standard. How do we, meet that or improve upon that? And so when we approached the Widow Tracer battles, we were like, okay, this has to feel crazy. We have to bring the audience into it. The cameras have to be really dynamic. So I would say even the inspiration comes from the people next to us as well.
All right, so we are about to watch the premiere of the next Blizzard animated short. Can you guys give us any kind of clue about what we are going to see?
We're all soldiers now.
All right, let's take a look.